Today we're working on the tanks, in particular the undermount tanks. I'm just starting that project here. Now, if you've been following along long enough, you know we actually bought another van before the van we have now. Back when transits were hard to get, we had ordered this transit, and then we were told by the dealer that we were not going to get a van. So at that point in time, we bought then a 2020, which was partially done. Someone had started to work on it. They had gotten part way through it. And we didn't quite like the way it was put together. I didn't quite like the way the tanks were mounted. They were strapped underneath with just steel that was not even painted steel. And they didn't use rib nuts in the frame to mount it. It was just looks like they tried to tap the frame or something. They weren't in very secure, so we took all that out. Just like we took all the batteries, everything out of the inside to strip it down to start and do it over. But between then, once we got it stripped down and started rebuilding it, we ended up getting a call then that we actually were getting our van. So now we have the new one and rebuilding that. But I've kept some of the things like the tanks and a lot of the electronics. We reused those, and we're now needing to figure out what's going on with these tanks. They're all wrapped. They actually have a fairly decent little metal surround. It looks like someone took some HVAC ducting and folded it up. It actually fits pretty well. But there's some connections here. Supposedly there's a heater connected here. There's also then a sending unit of some sort, but I don't know what. I don't know what brand. I don't know how it works. So I'm going to tear into this here, take all the covering off, and see if I can figure out what it is, what the tank is, what the connections are, what I need to connect it then to the systems inside and the water pump, so forth. So that's what we're working on today. I'm going to tear into this and see what it is. So this is actually on pretty good. It was glued onto the tank. And we'll probably try to reuse some of that and glue it back on. It looks like it just had contact cement holding it on. It's not bad. I'll finish unwrapping the rest of this, and you can see some of the connections here, I'm assuming, for the tank heaters. It looks like there might be two of them then, actually. And then this, I'm assuming, is the sending unit, but still don't know what type yet. So we'll dig into that a little more and see what we've got. Okay, here's what we end up having. We have then a 100-tech. I think that's it, 100-tech. It's a sending unit, electrical sending unit. And we actually even got instructions on the material that they gave us on putting that in. And then we've got water gauge. We have two of them. One for each tank, obviously. The sending units are installed already. And then these are Falcon heating pads, made specifically for RV tanks. There's two on this one, and then one on the other tank. I'm going to make up some of these electrical connections now. This is for the sending unit, and I need to put obviously a connector on it here. I use a lot of WeatherPack connectors, like these here, for especially connections on the car, but connections outside. I think these do a very good job of keeping then the connection solid and obviously keeping weather out of them, since this is going to be exposed. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to add then a terminal connector here, and then combine these two, and then reconnect to a larger wire then on the other side, carrying out to then the electrical in the van. Okay, I'm adding the connector here now. This is then what they would call the female connector. So it takes male inserts. They have two parts of this. This is where the non-insulated or the strip part of the wire goes. This is where the insulated part of the wire goes. And then this gets trapped in there with that. Take your crimper, insert your terminal in there, take the wire, put it so it is in the right spot. So that way the insulated part is in the insulated part, and none of that goes into where the non-insulated goes. Hopefully you can see that okay. And then, simple as that, then you crimp it, and there you go. Nice connected wire. Same thing's done over here already. Then you take these, and they just insert into the connector itself. And they click into place, like so, and then that is it. Now you have a nice insulated solid connection. Here is then the male side of that. You do the exact same thing, obviously, but just with the female terminals, and then it connects together, making a nice weatherproof connection. Tank's now rewrapped
And you can see I have the electrical connections coming out for the sensor and then the tank heaters. Also then for a fill, what is going to be for water out, and then a vent. I'm not sure if I'm going to use these hose connections. I probably will for the fill, but I don't think I will for the water. The vent I will. For the water out, I probably will not. But we'll see. I'm going to get this mounted. I can change those afterwards since this end is open anyway. See, it actually had a nice folded sheet metal case for it. Someone went and had some HVAC ducting bent, and it fits pretty well. I'm going to work on mounting this underneath on the driver's side here. All right, here's the tank just in place. What I'm going to do to mount this is, if I can get under here and get a good view of this or not, is up here where the straps go for the fuel tank. I'm going to use those points, come down off of that, across. I'm going to put some plus nuts in here and then bolt into there. So I'm using just 1/8 inch and a quarter steel. And we're going to fold it up here for the braces. Like so. Here's the first bracket done. Now on the outer part of the van, the frame rail is sloped down a little bit, so you need a little slope down there. And then this, you have to cut a little off of here to make sure it matches up so you can get it within the strap on the other one. Now I'll end up coating these with some Herculiner truck bed coating, and that way it protects them a little bit outside. Now 2 more to make. Putting a coating of bed liner, Herculiner truck bed coating. I've used this on a number of things. Coats pretty well, leaves a little bit of a texture, which again for this underneath the van, I think will work out just fine. Wait for these to dry, flip them over and coat the other side. This is not the easiest to video unfortunately under here, but you can see the tank is mounted now. Put plus nuts in here and then use where the strap for the gas tank goes for the other side. That's mounted there. I've got my cables here for the sensor and for the pad heaters for the tank heaters. Now you can see how I'm going to mount the fill. Here's where the fill is going to go in, and then I put a hole here, use the hole saw, put a hole in the inner fender wall here, and then go right up to the top here where the floor is. I will put another hole in there, and then that will go up the wall, and we can put the fill on the outside of the van right above there. As far as bringing water out of the tank, that's what this one is for here. I plan on running then hose to the back corner there, all the way back through here somewhere, haven't decided quite yet, to the back of the van. So here's what we use then to put the hole in the floor through the opening in the bottom. We use the extension so that way I could reach all the way up in there and put the hole in there for the drain tube to go down. Now we're gonna do Christine's favorite part. We're gonna put another hole in the van using a bigger hole saw right in this area here, so we can then run the hose down out the bottom there. So now that I had the pilot hole drilled, I could go to the inside and see right where it's going to be. I just want to make sure there weren't any wires that happen to be run right there that we're going to get into, just to make sure we don't have any problems that way. It doesn't look like it, so we're ready to finish making the hole.
Wear ear protection.
So there's the hole now. And the hole saw just got so dull so quickly that it was really just sliding on top there. It really was not cutting. So I switched to the jigsaw. And since I already had a guide from the hole being partially made, I switched to the jigsaw to cut the rest of it out, and it cut just fine. Since the jigsaw leaves such a rough edge, I filed that down and now taped it off so we can put POR 15 on there.
We're changing things up here a little bit. The hose was giving us trouble with the connector, the original water fill connector we're using. Because the hose is reinforced, when we were getting it in there, because there's only so much room between the inner wall and the outer wall here, about, you know, 5 or 6 inches. Once we put that on there, even though it was sloped down some, it was actually closing off. So by the time we put that in there to get that to close all the way in there, it was closing off almost completely and folding over. That way we weren't going to get any water flow down there. Also, because of the tension on this hose, it was actually trying to loosen the 2-piece part of that water fitting. I didn't like that. Now I could try to switch to a different hose. If we switch to a different hose, if I did one that wasn't reinforced, it might end up closing that on its own. I could get a corrugated one, it might work better. I'm not sure. I also then found a different part here for water. Now, this one, I like it a little bit better because it has a cover. So on the outside here, it'll be a little bit smoother. It'll match the part for the electrical. And when you open it, this also is locking. So the fill port itself then will lock. I like that a little bit better also. I also like the fact that it has 4 mounting points and they're at the end. The other one was round and had 3 mounting points, 2 here in the middle, 1 at the bottom. It didn't then allow us to get this to tighten along the top part of it as well as I would like. Because of that, it just had a little bit of a gap because this is rounded. Now with this one here, because it's square and it's got then, you know, on all 4 corners, it should flatten that out better. I think it'll then fit better and have a less chance of ever leaking. Even though obviously we'll silicone that, it'll give us less chance of leaking. This also has then a 45 in here. I'm gonna switch this to a 90 just because as this goes down, it still is fairly close. When you put it into the opening here, it gets close to the back there. And that's really not what we need. We need it to have a little bit of a better turn so that way the hose will go and exit out the bottom better. I really want to stay within the wall part of this instead of going inside. Now I could have the hose go inside more, but then all of a sudden now we've got more of a problem with it, you know, entering into where the seat is and things like that. So I want to put a 90 on here. This has already been glued on from the factory, so I'm gonna have to cut that off, smooth it out, and put a 90 on there, and that way I can just put a hose barb on the bottom. The hose will go straight down instead. That does create a little bit of a problem then when I'm going to fill it, because when you put it in here with the 90 there, it's sitting straight, the hose itself will just be pushed in. I don't know if I'm gonna get any spillage out of here, and I might need to use then a funnel or something like that. I'm hoping I'll be able to push the hose in far enough that it'll just fill on its own. So we'll see. Those are the things we're trying to tackle here today. This is wide enough that it fits the opening exactly right, as long as I expand it upwards this way. This part of it, the width, the 3.5-inch hole saw that we used will work out fine. I just have to then round these edges out so that way this will fit in there. It's not a round, it's actually a little of an oblong shape. All right, I've got the end taken off there now. I cut it off. I cut it off flush here first, and then I use the Dremel to cut pieces off of it, and then I just sand it around there. You can see it comes off pretty well. It's obviously not perfectly smooth or round. It doesn't need to be, but it's good enough that I can then get another end on. Now this end is obviously not what this is exactly for, but I wanted the hose barb, and this is actually a metric size. It's actually, I think, 32 millimeters instead of a 1.5 inches or 1.25 inches or whatever that turns out to be exactly. Well, I can't find an exact piece to put on there to make the 90 that I want. This here was close, and it's going to work out well because it's got a 1-inch hose barb on it, which is exactly what I need then for the hose. And then I knock some of those threads out of there with the Dremel also, and then it makes a nice tight fit. It's actually tight enough I have to work at it to get it on there. Once I get it, ooh, not even straight, there it goes. Once I get it on there, it's actually tough to get it off. I'm going to then epoxy that on there, something like a 2-part epoxy like JB Weld or something to put that on there, and then I can silicone around the edge. That should make that watertight. It should work out just fine. Now I've got the 90 that I need for a straight down hose connection, which will go at the bottom and then to the tank, which will work out better. What I ended up having was cold weld. This is Permatex cold weld. It's very similar to JB Weld, and then it's a 2-part resin. There are some differences. I looked it up real quick. Permatex cold weld, the PSI is only 3,000 versus JB is 5,000 PSI. Realistically for this, 3,000 is plenty. Cold weld does dry a little faster or cure faster, so I'm happy about that. And it's what I had on hand. So obviously because that's what I had, that makes it better for what we're gonna do right now. So I'm gonna mix these up. It's 1-to-1, so I'm just gonna mix them up 1-to-1 and then use them to put that on. So you can see I put a bead around the outside edge of that, and then I put it in here because the threads are in there. I want those threads to be filled also. Now we just press it together. Should be plenty on there, so it will squish out, which is good because it will help then seal the bottom here. And get that straight there where I want it. Let it sit that way. I'm going to get the rag and clean up a little of that excess because it's going to drip down. It's not necessary there. All right, there we go. You can see it fills in that gap pretty nice, so that should be nice and watertight once it dries. I could RTV that if I need to at the end if it leaks at all, but I can't imagine it will. I've also then took the cap off so I can get to the inside. In that way in there, I can make sure that there's none of the cold well that's getting down into the mechanism so it won't lock anymore. I also want to make sure that it is nice and smooth on the inside here so that we're not clogging anything up. So I'm just taking out a little of that excess that turned into a drip there. Very good. That'll work out just fine. I'm going to remake the opening here. I'm going to tape it up first. They did send a template, the fill neck, so I can use that template to cut then the opening here. But I'm going to tape it up first so that way I have something drawn and then also protect the paint for when we use the jigsaw on it. I'm going to use the jigsaw again. Obviously, hole saw won't work for this part. The jigsaw seemed to work very well on the metal, so we'll try that again. The template they supplied, you can see actually it's not quite the exact right shape. It would work because the flange on the outside is big enough that it would cover that, but why add the extra? So to me, I would rather have it just fit just right. So that's what I ended up doing then, is cutting that and trimming it so it fits right. I've transferred that to the van. I've actually made sure it is level compared to the line here. I want that to obviously sit square. And that's what I'm doing now, is going to cut that out. Here we go. Got that opening now made to be the right size. I'll test fit it obviously. Then I've got to drill the holes. Then I'll put POR 15 on that to treat the metal again, so we avoid rust there. Now we just got to do a little trimming. We'll be ready. Fill neck in here. Just what it comes out like. Again, it has a little lock on it, so you can't actually leave it unlocked. You have to turn the key to get the nozzle or the cap itself off. That's how you take it off. It doesn't actually twist. You turn the key and it just comes straight out and goes straight back on. But that's how that goes. You can see it makes it nice and tight along here with the two screws at the top, screws at the bottom. It flattens that out. Even though it's curved, it flattens it out, which makes it less likely to leak there. It's a silicone end, so hopefully it won't ever have any problems with leaking. If it does, I can put another bead around it if I have to. Let's go underneath here and see if we can get an idea. All right, it's tight quarters here, so it's not going to be a great video, but see if we can get you an idea. Obviously, here is the hole then that we put in for the fill nut tube. Comes down here to the top corner there. This other one is the vent, obviously up to there. They both then travel up through a hole I made in the floor, inside the wall, and then up. This is obviously out, and then it goes to this T that I put in, so I can shut the water off completely. I also have then a low drain point here, so when I open this, it'll be the low drain point to drain the tank. I have one coming, it's just not here yet, but I'm going to put a check ball valve right here, so that way the water that does go up the hose cannot drain back down, so that way it doesn't have to fill the hose every single time by having it drain back down. So that will go onto here, but it's not in yet, so I put this on just to make sure everything fits up nicely. I also then, because this is threaded here, I can add a air nozzle on here, the nipple on there, so that way I can blow air through, shutting this one off so it won't blow back into the tank. I can then blow air out of the system and blow out the lines then to winterize it. We haven't used winterizing agent in the motorhomes for quite a while. We always just blow the lines out, do it early enough, then we then just leave them open, and that way they can get rid of whatever little bit of air they have, or water they have left by evaporation before it freezes. So that's what we have.